Welcome back to Tool Racing. I've wanted to do this for a little while now, and I'm finally going to do it. These are what I consider field stick welders. Something you just drag out to a field and fix something wherever it sits. Tractor, combine, farm equipment, whatever you got. Wherever it's sitting, wherever it's broke, you're going to drag something out and fix it. The reason I wanted to do stick welders, there's so many great little flex core welders. In fact, we've reviewed them on the channel. However, those flex welders are limited to how thick they can actually weld. And the weld quality is always a little bit questionable, whether that's as strong of a weld as what would be done with like a 7018 welding rod. So I wanted to do a stick welder one. So I bought 3 welders, 200 amps, 160 amps, 250 amps. They all run on 110. The BS meter is pegged on this one. This welder was also $50. So that also, I think, broke the needle on my BS meter. But we'll see. We're going to test it. If it can do it, it can do it. And for $50, if that thing can actually pull it off, I'm going to recommend this welder. But I wouldn't hold your breath on that. This is the ArcCaptain Arc 160. This is a welder that has been recommended to me to review quite a few times. And so we're going to give this one a go. I feel like this is going to probably be a pretty good welder for a lot of people if it can actually pull off the numbers it says. This welder is it's a little less than $100. It's $96, I believe, currently as of today. Then Arc 200. So this is the next step up. And the reason I say that the 160 may be a better option than the 200 is I'm afraid the 200 is going to be really pushing the limit on what you're going to be able to provide out in the field. And I'm not sure if running at a lower setting will actually translate to lower demand. But we're going to see. We're going to test that. We're going to see how many amps it takes to run the welder. We're going to see how many amps the welders put out in comparison to their gauges. And we're going to see how many volts the welders put out, which makes it easier to start your weld. And then we'll see what kind of volts they put out while you're actually doing the weld. These 2 ArcCaptains will also run on 220. So they come with an adapter to run 110. We're going to be doing all our testing on 110. At the end of the video, we will plug them into 220 to see if the welder is improved noticeably over doing that. But for the most part, I'm going to save that to the end. I only want to know what these things will do on 110 as we're speaking, because I feel like that's how most people use them. You have a little Honda generator, a little Predator generator, one of those little dinky things. Those should be theoretically adequate to run any of these welders. I'm going to start actually in backwards order. We're going to start with 200. All right, so this is the ArcCaptain 200. I'm going to go over some of the features and some of the specs on this welder, and we'll do this to all the welders as we go. So the very beginning, this has the biggest of the 3 as far as lugs. So this is a 3550 lug, which is a 315 amp peak capacity lug. It's the biggest of all 3, and it's in excess of what is necessary for a 200 amp welder. However, the cable is small, so the cable is just adequate for the welder. In fact, we'll be testing whether or not it's undersized, but I feel like the cable itself is okay. So this has also the best ground clamp of the group. I'm going to give this like a grade C as far as quality. It's okay. It's not the best in the world, but for what this is, this clamp will probably last quite a while. It does have copper. It has the copper braiding, and it has a decent lug on there. So I don't see anything on this that's going to be something that you're going to have to replace anytime too soon. But with stick welders, they do tend, if you stick your rod or whatever, it does put a lot of load on a ground clamp. So having a really chintzy ground clamp, it will start melting away rather quickly on you. I think this one will last a decent amount of time though on there. The stinger itself, both of these leads are between 8 to 10 feet. So they're decently long, probably longer than it's really necessary for having a mobile welder like this. But they're decent in length. So this is a KB200, just like every single one of these says, which means it's a 200 amp stinger. And this one has like a cast copper end, and I'm assuming copper coated on the top side. It has pretty good grooves to hold the rod where you want it. It's nothing special, but I don't feel like this is under quality for what you need it for. So this is pretty good as well. I'll give this one like a B or a C. as far as quality. It's not the best in the world, but it's better than I would expect for a welder that cost $130. Okay, so it does have a decent length power cord. It really doesn't need to be this long. I, a lot of times, will upgrade and actually remove the cord and put a weld plug on there. I won't be doing that on this one since it's 230, so I will be leaving it, but I wouldn't mind shortening this to where it was very short. I don't like having cable. No matter what, you're gonna be running this on an extension cord. So having that additional 5 feet to drag around on your welder, to me, is, obviously it's not a deal breaker, but if this had a cord this long on it, I'd be totally okay with it. In fact, I'd be a little bit more happy. I can show you. This is what I normally do. Obviously, I use this in the field a lot. This is a titanium flux 125. Great little flux core welder. I modified it. I took the cord out and I put this plug on the side. So now you throw this thing in your truck, whatever, there's no power cord on it. You just plug the cord straight into the side. That's very handy. I also added a lug. These have a permanent fixed ground lead on them. So I added a lug. That's the 1025 lug, I believe is what they call them. So it's rated at 200 amp peak. I think 150 amp continuous, which is more than these little things. This puts out 125 amps. So great little upgrade. The other thing I did is I added a handle and I added latches. So these only come with a strap, and I hate straps. I like handles. So I could still put a strap on it if I wanted, but to do the handle like this, I also had to add these little clamps here. So I've modified this a little bit, but now this is the perfect little flux core welders. All right, so getting back to what we're actually supposed to be talking about, and that's this ARC200. So let's turn this thing on, plug it in, turn it on, and let's see what this thing can actually do. So the very first thing we're gonna do is if this thing breaks right away doing carbon testing, there's no point in testing it any farther. So we're gonna do that first. So we're gonna turn this on. I'm gonna set it at 115 amps. And if it can't do that, then, well, I guess the thing ends up in the garbage can and we'll move on to the next one, which I don't have very good high expectations if this one fails. But anyway, let's get going on that. This does have a computer, so you actually get to choose your electrode. So we'll go through that. I haven't turned these on yet. But let's start at 100 amps. We'll see how accurate it is. Then we'll move up to 150 and then we'll go to 200. So how we're going to do this, I got the ground hooked on here on the table. And then on this end, we basically just do this, which maxes out our voltage, as you can see by that gauge there. And this is where these DJI cameras are not the greatest, is at doing up close stuff. Okay, so it's reading our voltage, which is pegged. I got it on 24 volt. Amperage is going to be the same no matter what, so that's going to be the top dial there. I have it set at 100, so when I turn this and load it, we should be right here on our gauge. So we're slightly over, we're around 110 amps. And it only does that for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then the welder actually pitters out. And it's not it's because it's a inverter style, it runs out of basically what inside their capacitor. It runs out of capacitor. But that is a direct short, so that's acceptable. That's not anything to worry about. So it is saying about 110 amps. So our gauge there is a little bit off. So now let's go to 150 amps. So we should be in between the mark there and the 200. It should be right in the middle. I try to do this as fast as possible, so it's actually a little less. So we're about 140 amps when it says 150. So now let's go to the 200. Should be right at 200. And we're still about 140 on the direct short. So far, it's not quite putting out the amperage on a dead load as claimed, but it's not a deal breaker and it's not broken yet. So let's carry on with our testing and we'll see what the live rating is as we're welding with our little gauge there. So one thing I want to point out, if you put this on SYN, S-Y-N, I think it means sync, it allows you to select your electrode up there. 3.2 is an 1/8 inch rod, which is going to be a very common rod. And then it just basically puts you within range of that rod. So 80 to 140, which is, it's fine if you want to use the welder that way. at least you don't have to remember what the range of the rod is. You just have to remember what the metric equivalent of it is. But anyway, I like 1/8 inch rod at 115 usually. General, if you're going uphill and all that stuff, it seemed to be a pretty good amperage. So I'm going to try running it at that. I'm going to throw a weld down and just see how this thing welds real quick before we move on with testing. All right, so my camera did not work. It went out of focus, but it's okay because I fixed it right after this. So I'm actually really excited about that. I figured out a fix to my welding camera. So from here on out, we're gonna have better quality video. So I'll just end this here now and we'll see what it looks like. So that horn. So that, it welded pretty good. The start was a little harder than I was expecting. It's possible that it's because I didn't have it tacked down to or clamped. I just did it live, but it welded pretty good. It felt a little colder than 115 amps like I'm used to, but all in all, it's pretty nice little weld. So flux came right off. Good old 7018. All right, so it welded. Now let's see the current and voltage while we weld the next pass. And I got a better camera this time. Hopefully this will work a little nicer. So what I did is I actually zip tied the hood. I had the hood around it and then I had the coat over it. That, it didn't work. It didn't look very good, as you just saw. So I'm going to try this. So this is what it looks like right now. So it's pretty good. So hopefully this will focus a little better. So we'll do another pass. I'm going to turn it up to 125. And, but this time we're going to have our voltmeter on it. So we're going to have this camera pointing on this, and then we'll hook our ground to our stent here, like that, and then I just have to plug this into a cigarette lighter, and I have to put this onto the positive lead. So it's a little bit of work, but I'm gonna get it all set up right now. All right, so I thought I had it figured out, and apparently the camera goes out of focus again. So we are gonna get better. I already saw some of the footage before, so it is going to get better. But you can at least listen to it, and you can see the volt in the amps, which is the upper left number on the blue screen, and then right below that is the amperage. And so you can see the two. So remember, this gauge reads about 10% low. I don't know if I can calibrate that out of it. I don't think I can. So it is running around 125 amps, which is what it's supposed to be running at. So it's doing pretty good, and we have mid-20s voltage. All right, so this is 140 amps.
Doesn't really feel much different. So that would go through its and raw, but it does not feel at 140 now.
All right, so what I was feeling is correct. It's not 140 amps, it's 125 to 130. That's all that it's putting down for some reason. All right, guys, so this thing's putting out about 130 amps on the generous side, 125, 130. That is it. So on 110 power. It says it's supposed to be 20 to 200 on the chart there. So what we're going to do real quick is plug it into 230 and make sure that we're just not at a limitation that they forgot to adjust their documentation, that we're not just on a limitation of it running on 110. So let's plug it in 230 and see what that does. All right, so looking at our amps there, again, second down, it is definitely running at our 140 now, maybe even a little bit over 140. So we got our amps, we have it set at 140. It's running at least 140, probably 145 or so. And it's running good. It feels like it like that. We're still maintaining good voltage. So I think that's the problem. They forgot to adjust their charts. The chart clearly states it'll go to 200. And it doesn't. It only goes to about 125. It doesn't make the welder useless, but it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, so I'm a little disappointed in that regard. Now, it did 140 there quite nicely, and so I'm happy with that. But that's on 230. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to plug it back into 110, but we're going to be using a gauge, I'm just going to go ahead and set the welder at 140 since we know it's only putting out 125 anyway. I'm going to leave it at 140. I'm going to run another weld. We're going to measure the amperage that it's taking on 110 to run that welder. So let's see that. Okay, so upper left, we got our amp gauge. So it's peaking over 15 amps. It's continuously using a little over 15 amps. So definitely going to need a 20 amp breaker to run this. And essentially this welder is maxed out at on 110. It is maxed out. This is all it's going to be able to do on 110. So we have it turned up higher than it'll actually go. And it is what it is. It still welds good. It's just only putting out 125 amps or so on 110. So I guess we're going to have to just live with that. All right, guys. So I feel like I'm doing the same test over again because it looks exactly the same. It's just a little smaller. But this is what I've noticed already. So when it's plugged into 110, our 160 amp welder, if you put it on sin, or whatever that is supposed to mean, 2.5 is the biggest rod it lets you have. So we're going to assume that's about 332, and 90 is as high as it'll go. So the most you can get out of it on 110 is 90 according to that. But we can cheat, and we can try just to see where it does limit itself to by doing it this way. So what's different is it has the smaller lug. So this is the 1025 lug. It's adequate for the amperage rating of the machine. It's no big deal, but it is different. So these cables will not interchange plugging in wise to the 200. All right, so for the sake of just saving time, I just went ahead and maxed the machine out to 160, and we'll just see what it can do. And then we'll turn the machine down to wherever it says and see how accurate it is at that point. So, bam. We're at about 103 or so amps. So I'm going to turn the machine down to 100. Let's see if it still hits 100. Yep, still hitting 100. So the gauge is pretty accurate. Let's move it down to 75. Let's see if it's 75. That should be that last little tick there before the bigger one. And it's actually reading about 100. Let's go down to 70. A little under 100. Let's go all the way down to 50. And now it's a little less than 75. So it's putting out a little more amps than you got there. That doesn't necessarily relate to what it's going to be while we're welding. We'll use the other gauge as that reference. All right, so this is 332 rod at 100 amps on the machine. I'm looking at putting out about 90 amps according to that gauge up there. It says 81.6, 81.8, which is going to be right around 90. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the way that thing is. It is taking 15 amps. That is pretty accurate on the draw side on the 110. And if you had that on a 15 amp breaker, I'm pretty sure you'd pop your breaker because it does crest over 15 every once in a while. All right, you got to love the little 332 rod. It does lay some really nice welds. It's really pretty. I don't know how well that's coming across, but anyway, that welded fantastic. Unfortunately, that's all it got. That's as big as it can go. Now we'll have to review the video because I actually don't know how many amps that took to do it. So now let's do the exact same thing, but I'm just going to crank the machine up. It's not going to do anything different, I don't think, but we'll see. Let's try it.
It does feel a little bit more,
Oh, and by a little bit, I must have meant a little bit. I think it was just because the plate was a little warmer. It's running about exactly the same cranked up. So basically on 110, you're going to get about 90 amps out of it. So you notice the amps there are just under 15, floating around there in the 14s. And that's about an amp less than the 200 was taking when it was maxed out. All right, so I have the machine set at 125, and we're using 1/8 inch rod on 220. Plugged into 220. It's putting out probably 130 amps, a little bit higher than what we were shooting for, but it's welding really well. It's doing pretty good. We got good voltage, 23, 25 volts, depending on how I'm stubbing it out. I'm kind of playing with the arc there
And I was talking like crazy over the video while I was doing it, talking about welding techniques. You couldn't hear a word of it. So I just I'm just omitting that audio. And then I'm stubbing it out right there to see if the welder will stall, but it didn't. All right, so this is with the welder maxed out at 160. And it's about the same. It won't go up above like 130. So remember the last one was about 160 was the max it could do. It was a little less than 160. So this one's kind of in the same ballpark of being a little disappointing. So it's about 130, so we're 30 amps shy, and this is on, of course, 230 amps of our 230 volt service. So it welds great. It's just doesn't go as high as I'd like it to. Here I actually really tried to stub it out, and it didn't go. So the welder actually has some pretty good, we'll call it torque.
All right, so there's our, quote unquote 160 amp weld. I did weave this one a little bit side to side, so it's a little wider than it would have been. I didn't do as much of a slinger as I had been. I don't know what made me do that. And then I buried it down there just to see if the welder would stall out or not. It didn't. I really pushed down there, like physically put pressure down, and it didn't stall out, so it stayed. So that was pretty good. Really, the welding wise, I'm not gonna lie, those little welders weld great. I just wish that they do what they say they were gonna do, because I don't know what we got there, and I'm really anxious to go up and look at the video. I know it wasn't no 160 amps though in that last pass. Might have been 140. Nah, probably not. 135 maybe. That's my guess. So we're gonna find out right now. I'm gonna look at this video. Well, I guess I'm not, because this is gonna be after. So now we get to just see if I was right, because I have to edit it in opposite order. Weird. Smoky in here. Now I got to open the door again. All right, and now we're on to the other welder that's probably going to be a disappointment, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be surprisingly good. We'll see. Okay, so one thing I am going to do different, I am going to be using the stinger from the last 160 welder that we just tested. And the reason for that is all my gauges and stuff are over here, and this won't reach. Well, maybe it would, but it would be very tight. So I'm just going to use the other stinger, and we're going to avoid this. I did not point out on that 160 that it had the same stinger, but with a smaller lug. I think I've talked about the lug. And then the ground clamp, I forgot to mention. I gave the other one a C. This one's going to be a D-. It's just barely adequate. And then the ground clamp that comes with the Mini. So I was referencing the 160. This is the 160's ground. The ground clamp that comes with this Mini 250. This one is like a D-. Like it will make a ground, and that's about it. And it's very short, but it's fine. It works on this one. We'll use it. But the stinger is too short to do our testing, which is, I could rearrange everything. There's really no reason. Okay, so, and the quality of it is subpar. It's a piece of crap. It still says KB200, but it doesn't have indents for the rod, and anyway, it's Anka crap. It's not very good, but I don't have high expectations from this welder anyway, so we'll see. All right, so turn it on. It says 250 amps. Duty cycle 160 amps, 100%. 250 amps, 60%. So the gauge goes to 249. I got it all set up. I don't actually know what I want to do first. It only runs on 110. So whatever it does on 110 is what it does. I think what we should do now is just turn it up all the way, stick it on the carbon tester, and see what the heck the thing can put out or blow up. One of the two. So let's do that. Whoop, got it right here. Let me just hook it up real quick. That's very easy to do. We just got to do this. I'm going to go ahead and hook these ones together because I don't really know about that guy. And then our lead here, like this. Boom. And now, get this on there. All right, ready? Let's see what a 250 amp welder will do. Like 105. 105 amps. Let's do it again. Yeah, about 100 105 amps. Or no, I'm sorry, that's 110 amps. That's 110 in between. The line would have been 20. Okay, so it says 120. Let's turn it to 120 and see if it is accurate at least to 120. So there's 120. Nope, we're about, what is that? That's 80, so that's 75. So 120 is 75. So this is exactly how I was expecting this to go, this thing. Let's put it at 80 amps and let's see what it says on here. It says 60 amps. So we're getting closer, I guess. It's probably percentage-wise, probably about the same. So let's do 50 amps. Let's see what it says. Oh, it actually is 50 amps. So we found where it's accurate at. It's 50 amps. Okay, so it puts out 110 amps if it's maxed out. All right, so that means we should be able to run 1/8" rod fairly decent. 110 amps, right? All right, so let's try that. 110 amps, so we're just going to max it out because that's how we have to get there. So 250 amps is going to be 110 amps. And we'll see if it runs that 1/8" rod. It should run it. It'll be a little on the cold side, but it should work.
Oh, so. Oh,
That didn't like that. That stuck real bad. So I was referring to it as torque the other earlier. There's not much there. So I think 1/8" rod is a little bit much for this thing. Let's move on to 332 rod. And we'll see if it can if it can run that. I'm just gonna leave it alone. It's maxed out. Here is 332 rod. It feels like a tinker toy.
it's. Oh, there it goes.
Man, even that doesn't feel like
110 amps.
it's welding pretty good now. Not really good. Oh. All right.
Yeah.
It worked. It actually doesn't look too bad. Yeah, it's hard. I'm gonna scratch start it. I don't like scratch starting if I don't have to, but I'm gonna go right to the do that. Oh.
The hole there is still it. Another hole, still this one. Wait.
All right. Well, it doesn't weld bad. Right, it's just not hot. Well, all right, so I'm kind of at a loss of what to do with this. I don't have smaller rod. and unfortunately, it can barely run 332 rod. So, it didn't really run it that bad once it gets going, but it's just a little on the cold side. All right, guys, I got to do the final closeout and final thoughts on these little welders. Okay, so this one didn't turn into a puddle of plastic, so I'm impressed. But it's still hot trash. Worthless. You know, and if it claimed what it could actually do, had a gauge that represented it, it wouldn't be bad. I mean, it's still small, doesn't do much, but if you only need to weld small stuff, it'd be great. But it's hot trash. It's stupid. Link in the description below if you want to buy it. I make commission on that. Don't buy it, please. Okay, so now we get into the ArcCaptain 160. And to me, if this said 130, Arc 130, had accurate dial and accurate representation in the specs sheet and all that stuff, I would say this is a pretty good welder, but a little small for most things. But because it's inaccurate, it's a little small for both things, has inaccurate hot trash. I don't like it. It's dumb. They should have represented it with what it actually is instead of false claims to make it seem like it's something that would be useful and not nearly as useful as that. So now we get into the 200, which should be called the Arc 160. Hey, we have an Arc 160. This one actually put down numbers that would be representative to Arc 160 numbers. And it's a great welder. And if it had accurate representation of its capacities in 110 and capacities in 220, it said Arc 160, had a chart that followed it, I'd be preaching this thing. I'd say this is a great little welder for 130 bucks. And it still is. But you're left with a little bit of guessing game on the dial. And you have inaccurate charts, inaccurate claims. And that's super frustrating. That being said, I don't know if there's a better welder you can get for $130. It just, man, I just wish they claimed this thing. I wish they had accurate claims on this. That is insanely frustrating, especially someone like this who's trying to make a name for themselves. It's just, man, why can't you just say what it actually is? You know what it actually is. When you put it on sync mode, you know the capacities in 110 and stuff. Put it in your chart. Put it on your label. Don't say it goes to 200 and then have it only 160 on 220. I don't understand any of that. But whatever. It is what it is. It is a good welder. I'm going to keep it until something better comes along. The other two, those are going to be for sale. I'll probably just bring them to swap meet with me next time. Because I'm not going to have people showing up to the house for them. So anyway, I really like this welder. It's great. I don't like the misrepresentation of it, but I don't know of a better one. So let me know if you do, because I would love to find one that actually had accurate claims. So whether it's say 160 is basically my minimum. I was really hoping this would actually do it. 160 or one that was 200 that actually went 200 would be great. But anyway, let me know in the description below. I'm going to do a welding. I'm all set up for stick welding. So I'm going to do a welding tutorial video. Very simple for basics on stick welding. I'm just going to stick with 1/8 inch. I can't use this because I need an accurate dial so that I can actually show people how to set the things and not explain to them why the dial isn't accurate. So I'll be using the Vulcan, which does have accurate dials. And I'm going to do a 7018 beginner's tutorial on welding, striking an arc, doing vertical, all that fun stuff, out of position stuff. And just some tips and tricks on getting that done. So anyway, if you have any recommendations, definitely comment that below. And if you have any recommendations on a welder like this one that has accurate representation of what it actually is, definitely let me know too. So we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.